Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into something absolutely wild. We're going to decode a highly surreal, undeniably bizarre, and honestly, deeply fascinating dream sequence. We're looking at a first-hand account that perfectly captures that universal pressure to succeed and, well, that terrifying fear of complete inadequacy. It's literally a journey straight into the subconscious mind, and we're going to break down exactly why our brains do this to us.
So let's jump right in. Have you ever woken up feeling like your own brain just spent the last 8 hours meticulously constructing scenarios specifically to tear you down? Because that is exactly the profound disorientation and emotional weight we're about to explore here. The dreamer in our source material goes through an absolute gauntlet of psychological distress. And surprisingly, it starts in a place usually associated with totally chilling out. The dream opens on a midsummer beach. Sounds nice, right? But something is deeply, deeply wrong. The entire ocean is covered in a giant sheet of clear nylon. The dreamer can see the waves. They can even feel the squishy water beneath the plastic with their feet, but they're completely physically locked out of the experience. This opening visual is just brilliant because it instantly sets this surreal tone and introduces a massive recurring theme for us, being totally isolated from natural, authentic, refreshing experiences.
And, here is where the absolute absurdity kicks in. Scattered all over the sand are PlayStation 5 consoles and super high-end headphones. Through these headphones, the dreamer hears the voices of famous Japanese gaming YouTubers Otoja and Anija. In the pure, unfiltered logic of this dream, these successful streamers have so much wealth that they've actually rented out the entire beach and covered the ocean in plastic just so their gaming equipment won't get wet while they vacation. It's crazy.
So right away, the dreamer is positioned as this completely powerless spectator. They're invited to sit down among all this wealth and luxury, but there's a huge catch. They have no monitor. So they're physically present, sitting right there on the sand, but they have absolutely no ability to participate. They literally cannot play the game of success that's happening all around them. Talk about the ultimate feeling of being excluded from the winner's circle.
Which brings us to our first major shift, the architecture of shame.
We abruptly shift gears from this very public exclusion into deeply private humiliation. Two women in bikinis approach the dreamer and invite him to a party. So he follows them into this room glowing with red neon lights, all decked out with a large table and luxurious sofas. Now, this setting makes a pretty clear promise, right? Intimacy, connection, maybe some validation. But as we all know with dream logic, the subconscious immediately subverts this, turning what should be an intimate encounter into a stage for visceral, intense shame.
It's honestly fascinating how the subconscious weaponizes our vulnerability. A surreal sexual encounter begins, but it's entirely stripped of any actual intimacy. A second woman is sitting nearby laughing with other men, and she actually quizzes the dreamer on whether he knows how to please a partner. When he confidently tries to demonstrate, the woman he's with just laughs and bluntly says, "You're completely wrong." Suddenly, this whole audience of onlookers is clapping and laughing hysterically at him. The physical act itself becomes a weapon. The dreamer actually notes it felt way less like intimacy and much more like being violently, metaphorically trampled on from above. Now, looking at this through the lens of psychology, what we are dealing with here is a textbook, albeit extremely vivid anxiety dream. Your subconscious isn't just replaying memories. No, it is actively constructing worst-case scenarios of inadequacy. It takes the most vulnerable human situations like sexual intimacy and corrupts them to amplify the dreamer's deepest, darkest waking insecurities about just not being good enough. And the nightmare doesn't stop there. Next up, mocked by the elite.
The dream now escalates from a private room into the ultimate public arena. Suddenly, the women vanish. The dreamer is now wearing a suit, sitting on a sofa, in the exact same room, but it's totally transformed into this high-class successors party. And he isn't alone. He is surrounded by world-renowned motivational speakers and incredibly successful mental coaches, including, of all people, the legendary Tony Robbins. So the dreamer is rubbing elbows with their actual real-life idols, eating, drinking, and trying so desperately to fit in. But of course, the humiliation just quickly compounds. The elite partygoers start taking turns giving speeches. But when it's the dreamer's turn to speak, the whole room starts giggling. Tony Robbins, his literal idol, covers his mouth, clearly laughing at the dreamer's earlier intimate failure, like they all know about it. And when the dreamer tries to speak a second time to defend himself, his voice is literally taken away. No sound comes out. Only useless air escapes from his mouth.
He's rendered entirely, completely powerless in front of the very people he admires most.
And this brilliantly illustrates a classic, honestly heartbreaking psychological response. Frustrated and unable to speak, the dreamer realizes that his idol, Tony Robbins, is at least paying attention to him, even if it's just to mock him. So what does the dreamer do? He intentionally keeps blowing useless air out of his mouth just to keep the elite laughing. He completely sacrifices his own dignity and plays the fool just to hold on to that fleeting validation from his idol.
The contrast of what happens next is just staggering. While the successor's party represents wealth, validation, and arrogance, the dreamer is abruptly banished. He gets moved to a dark, wall-less room right next door to the party. Suddenly, he's an employee at a childcare facility, thrust jarringly into this environment of pure, stressful responsibility, intense vulnerability, and, as we'll see, impending failure.
Let's look closer at this phase, the incompetent caretaker.
So, while that elite party rages on right next door, the dreamer's anxiety shifts to a terrifying lack of everyday competence. And this breaks down into a compounding series of workplace failures. The dreamer is tasked with handing out clipboards to children. A small boy with developmental disabilities comes up crying because he lost his clipboard, so the dreamer hands him a new one. But this happens repeatedly. Eventually, the dreamer actually accidentally gives away a clipboard that belongs to another child. Seeing this total mess, a male coworker steps in from behind, utterly disgusted by the dreamer's incompetence, and tells him to just step aside and watch how it's done. And the coworker does something incredibly simple. He just writes the boy's name on the clipboard so it won't get lost again. The dreamer is devastated. Like, why didn't he think of that simple solution? He feels entirely useless. And adding to this visual of failure, the red plastic testing sheet attached to his clipboard is cracked right in half and won't fit properly. This total inability to manage a simple task with a broken clipboard breaks the dreamer's spirit far more effectively and way more deeply than the mockery of the elite ever did. Looking back at the party for a second, the subconscious plays a truly cruel trick. A spotlight suddenly hits the dreamer. Thinking it's finally his turn to shine, he sits back on his sofa, crosses his legs, opens his arms, and strikes this arrogant, successful pose, but no one is impressed. Tony Robbins just chuckles, and a wheelchair-bound scientist randomly rolls right past. It's peak dream absurdity. But it serves as a harsh reminder that the dreamer's attempts at projecting superiority are just a hollow, laughable illusion.
Finally, we reach the climax of this dream, the inner child's tragedy. We move outside into the rain for, honestly, the most heartbreaking realization of all. The mood drops drastically here. It's raining heavily outside the building. A vehicle that looks like a private ambulance pulls up at high speed, and 3 workers step out. We learn this is a private organization that takes away people who have developmental struggles and just cannot function or survive in normal society. And the person they're taking away, it's that same little boy who kept losing his clipboard. As the boy is being led away, he speaks a truly chilling final thought. You can't survive as a child without money. Wow. This strikes at the very core of this entire subconscious narrative. It's a devastating critique of a world where innocence and vulnerability are seen as liabilities, and where survival is strictly tied to your financial capability. When we look at the whole picture, the real meaning becomes crystal clear, doesn't it? The struggling boy isn't just a random child. No, he represents the dreamer's own vulnerable inner child. The elite party? That's the ruthless, untouchable, capitalist ideal that the dreamer aspires to but ultimately feels mocked by. And the failure in the childcare facility is the dreamer's profound fear that they can't even protect their own vulnerable self. The ultimate fear visualized here is being fundamentally inadequate and being entirely left behind by a success-driven society. Which leaves us with this final lingering thought. In a world totally obsessed with success, what happens to the parts of us that just can't keep up? This dream forces us to look hard at how our deepest anxieties shape the way we measure our own worth. It's a really powerful reminder to examine what success actually means to us, and maybe more importantly, who we might be leaving out in the rain to achieve it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning what you see.